Olá, muito bom dia a todos. Eu sou Daniela Lemos, em nome do Fundecitrus, dou as boas-vindas a todos vocês para essa nona edição da pesquisa
edition of the crop forecast survey carried out by PES. This is such an important meeting we have here every year. Fundecitrus would like to thank you all here in person in our auditorium. It's very good to have you here for one more edition of this meeting. And also we have here the presence of 150 people. But also we are live online by being broadcasted on our YouTube channel. You that are joining us online, this transmission has simultaneous translation to 26 countries right now. Thank you so much, you that joined us online. Welcome. We'd like to remind you that the annual crop estimate survey announcement has criteria confidentiality until the date of the publication in a while. This is done according to agreement signed between each of the people working here in this PES and Fundecitrus. And you know why this is so important for us to have all this ritual of confidentiality? To guarantee that any information or content that may benefit individually some company is shared between those producing orange juice and collaborates with Fundecitrus, those that buy orange juice, and citrus growers. This way, we advocate the fair competition. And now we are going to have all the members of the committee of the crop forecast survey members coming up. They have been finalizing the numbers that will be announced in a while. Here we see they're walking down our aisles in our building, and in a while they're going to come in and will join us so that we can finally announce such important numbers. And the guarantee of the data confidentiality is so important that I would like to remind you that during the meeting, all those people coming in had their cell phones restricted. So the information was restricted to Fundecitrus General Manager, Technical Supervisor, Specialist, Juliano Aires, that is the General Manager, Fernando Delgado, Technical Supervisor, Vinicius Trombin, Marcos Fava, José Carlos. So they're joining in with the numbers that are eagerly awaited by our community citrus growers, all this community working in citrus that follow up on data, that are eager to hear those figures. And now let's start our meeting by inviting all members to join us up here in Araraquara, in the inner part of the state of São Paulo. First, Dr. Lorival Carmo Monaco, Fundecitrus President. Please join us. Also, I'd like to invite Fundecitrus General Manager Antônio Juliano Aires. Executive Coordinator linked to Market Strat, Vinicius Gustavo Trombin. Professor at Unesp and coordinator of the statistics area, José Carlos Barbosa. PES specialist Roseli Reina and Fernando Delgado, who is a technical supervisor in the field. And by video conference, we have the political, institutional, and methodological coordinator linked to Market Strat and full professor at FEA, USP, and FGV, Marcos Fava Neves, will join us in a while at the time we have the data announced. I'd like to thank you all for coming and being here with us today. Thank you so much.
E para você que está
And
acompanhando a gente
you
aqui
following
presencial
us,
ou
joining in
virtualmente,
person
você
or
possa se
online,
organizar
for you to get organized, I'm going to tell you a little bit how this celebration or ceremony today is going to go. We have 4 steps. First, we are going to have the institutional video shown. It's about PES. And then you're going to have the crop announcement. And then you're going to have the main data for the crop estimate. And to end, it's a very important moment for Fundecitrus, the Q&A session. We would like to have your participation, because that's really a very important time for Fundecitrus to clarify all questions you may have. And you, joining us online, please send your question through our chat. The chat is the channel for you to send in your questions so that we can answer towards the end of the ceremony. After the presentation given by Juliano, then questions are going to be answered, okay? So let's start. And for that, I'd like to invite you all, those here in person and those joining us online, for us to watch the video that highlights the work of PES and all the information it brings to the sector in São Paulo, in southwest Minas Gerais, the largest producing region of orange in the world. This year, PES also has something really new to us. That is a super important survey that is very rich in information carried out in partnership with Embrapa. It's going to quantify the carbon stock and also the fauna present in our citrus belt. This is beautiful work that I'd like you to get to know. So let's please watch the video.
Let's travel through the São Paulo and Minas Gerais citrus industry. Enjoy the ride. São Paulo is one of the largest economies in the world, ahead of countries such as Belgium, Austria, Norway, and Denmark. The Southeast region is the driving force of the Brazilian economy, and citriculture is one of the locomotives of São Paulo and Minas Gerais states. Oranges are part of our origin, of our culture, of our pride. And the Crop Forecast Survey and the Fundecitrus Tree Inventory are our stop at governance, where highly reliable data and information can be found. With cutting-edge, high-resolution image capturing technology, a methodology which is enhanced every year, together with strict auditing processes, which are simultaneously made available to all global players in the orange juice industry. Our citriculture values democracy. When all have access to the same data and information at the same time, this simply means democratizing the access to up-to-date knowledge. For citrus growers, the PES and the tree inventory are working tools, instruments that support decision-making, that underpin short, medium, and long-term strategies. The PES and the tree inventory mean transparency. But beyond its nutritional richness, brought to the United States, Europe and Asia, beyond its economic and social wealth, the São Paulo and Minas Gerais citriculture has also plenty of diverse environmental wealth. It is an activity connected with the environment, which respects nature to learn how to be better. The mapping of the citrus growing area, performed by the Citrus Crop Forecast Survey, enabled the Empresa Brasileira de Pesquisa Agropecuária, Embrapa, connected to the Brazilian Federal Administration, to quantify the carbon stock and the wildlife in groves and preserved areas on citrus farms. The São Paulo and Minas Gerais citriculture provides energy, vitamin C, and strength to the immune system. It creates jobs, fosters preservation, combining better nutrition with ESG. This quantification is just another stop. The travel through citriculture does not stop, ever. It is a journey of development, of sustainable development, endless. It improves at every stop, every spring, every crop season. That is the beauty of it.
Strong and sustainable, and even contributes to decreasing global warming, because if we reduce carbon from the atmosphere and transforming it into oxygen, it's something that we are really proud of. It's really nice to be able to talk about this and be part of all this, being a player in the sector, even if it's a small one. It's really high relevant to have this Orange Crop Forecast Survey announced for the São Paulo and Southwest citrus belt that has been carried out by PES since 2015 in cooperation with Marques Strat and the full professors of Unesp Jaboticabu and USP-FEA Ribeirão Preto. And it's never enough for me to say how important data is, because besides providing a snapshot of the citrus belt, also contributes to the planning of the sector for citriculture to be competitive and remain competitive social and economically due to the high creation of job and income, and also environmental because of the large area of preserved vegetation on farms, and also the advancement in control of pests and disease. Once again, I'd like to remind you that data that will communicate here will restrict it only to the Fundecitrus president and general manager, supervisor and specialists of pests, and our survey partners, Marques Strat, Unesp Jaboticabal, and USP-FEA Ribeirão Preto. All of them are subject to the confidentiality agreements. until the publication to the public. That's going to happen right now. Time's
Vamos lá então, gente. Hora do anúncio da safra
up. It's time for us to announce the 2023-2024
Eu convido ao
orange crop forecast.
Lorival Carmo Monaco.
So for that, I'd like to invite Fundecitrus President Lorival Monaco.
Dr. Lorival.
Dr. Lorival.
Nessa nona oportunidade, o Fundecitrus e seus parceiros
This is an opportunity for us, partners in the citrus sector, to meet their commitments to inform the sector
da importância
of the citriculture about the importance of our knowing the yield and the production, the profile of our groves, and for us to be able to do increasingly more in terms of its being yield more, to be fair, and to expand.
identificação da produtividade
We then
da produção
communicate production yield that will present a picture of everything that took place without any bias or skewed information that will affect the market. For us, it's extremely important that this takes place. We'd like to thank you all, those joining us here in person and through the media, to show you that Fundecitrus, our society, increasingly more help and show value to the citriculture in São Paulo and Minas, and also communicate the yield that we have obtained. I'd like to thank you all for coming, and I'd like to now communicate the number that I get to know this minute. The care that we have for this to have top reliability and confidentiality makes me know just now the details of this figure. So the estimated crop is 309,340,000 boxes of oranges, commercial and to the market. This is a figure that indeed shows that although we have some variation in the last times, we have our forecast that is very close to the actual figures. Thank you so much. Let's go on with the presentation. Now I'll give the floor to Juliano Aires. Thank you, Dr. Monaco.
Gente, então número bastante relevante.
Such a relevant figure that I'll repeat here to you. 309,340,000 boxes. This is the crop forecast.
Estimativa da nossa safra. Agradeço mais uma vez, Dr. Monaco.
Once again, Dr. Monaco, thank you for bringing that information to us. And now for the detailing of data
Vai trazer todos os detalhes da estimativa de safra.
of the crop forecast is the Fundecitrus General Manager, Juliano Aires. Juliano is going to explain everything in detail to us. And meanwhile, I'd like to remind you all, those joining us online on our YouTube channel, to please send your questions by means of the chat, so that we can answer the questions you may have after Juliano's presentation. Juliano, you have the floor.
Bom dia a todos.
Good morning, everyone.
Gostaria de dizer,
I'd like to say
na minha vida,
that in my life as an agronomist and manager, I consider this day to be the most important one in my life in citriculture. Brazilian citriculture goes through a very significant moment, and we have to decide the way to go. So we will comment a lot on the crop forecast, but also we can't fail to mention that this is a singular moment we have in terms of the greening. So this presentation will mention those two topics. Dr. Monaco mentioned that we have a crop forecast that is very close to the previous one. We have larger fruit, 4.5% less weight. So we have a little drop in production as compared to the previous one. In the previous crop, just for us to remind ourselves, we had 314 million. We had the estimate of 316 million. But because of rains being above expected levels, and because of a later crop, because of plant diseases like greening, black spot, and fruit borer, we had this decrease. But the figure has practically not changed much. So what about this crop? What's new? What's different in relation to the previous ones? This crop, in relation to the three previous ones, brought rains that are present 50% above historical average. And that's very relevant. Since the time of the beginning of flowering in August until now, in May, we could see that there's been rain that were well distributed and above average. That brought beneficial and effects, but also bad ones. It's important to highlight that differently from the three previous years, rainfall picked up and were above expected levels, which is good for orange trees and fruit growth, but at flowering in some specific situations it may cause problems in terms of post-bloom fruit drop. And then we have here Duartina, Itapetininga flowering that was induced by rain and cold, and then rains picked up in Bebedouro and the other regions. Flowering increased in those areas, and then in October rains practically generalized, especially in the southeast region, but also east, central, north a little bit less. And then in November practically all places, orange growing places, were received rain well above normal. And then from December to April we had 40% average more rain than previous years. That made a lot of difference. 50% of the days had rainfall. It was very atypical. That didn't happen for 30 years. So we had the means for orange trees and fruit to develop exceptionally for the 4 blooms that took place in that period of time. What is the negative effect that happened in terms of rain? We know that post-bloom fruit drop, if we have excessive moisture at the time of flowering, especially in the colder regions, even with spraying that are constant, that may affect the crop. But in Itapetininga, we had significant losses due to this post-bloom fruit drop. So here we have Itapetininga, where we couldn't have the control at the right time. Avarelli, Meira, Duartina. This symptom here shows that the fruit has been lost by the disease at the time of flowering. We know that the orange tree has a biannual bearing cycle. That is, a year when it produces more, the reserves in the leaves and root system decreases, especially in late varieties, but also has the hormonal effect that will induce lower flowering in the following year. Okay, so the regions that had the lowest yield last year was like north and northwest, and today there was a reversal of that. As you can see, Altinópolis, that is a region that doesn't have a lot of irrigation. See what happened to an early variety, in this case Hamlin. The highest yield that we have this year is in the region of Altinópolis. And then in the southeast, we have the decreased production, as we are going to see later on. So what happened here? Especially in the case of Natal, that is the variety that is the later, besides the Folha Murcha, the fruit was remained in a tree for longer, and harvest took longer until February and March. Then there was a depletion in those orange trees, and the flower induction was not as much as well as reserves. In this variety specifically, we could see the highest decrease, or the largest decrease in yield in comparison to the previous crop. And what is the major point here? If the climate is good, if rains are well distributed, if we have a good number of fruit, 4.5% less, why is it that we have fruit drop that is high? Because we have the biggest problem in the worldwide citriculture, that is called greening. Nothing compares to that. This disease, wherever it comes in and stays, it decimates citriculture. Florida came down from 200 million down to 16 million. What is the what was the forecast by Beauvais and PT? Everything was predicted as projected as firstly estimated. But this disease is the inflection point for any citriculture in the world to change our forecast. So intensity is increasing, and also its severity. So we can mathematically estimate that the drop due to greening is going to increase even further. Maybe not the other factors, but then you're going to have a level of 21%. The greening aspect caused a change when in 2015 to 2018, 19, where we had this disease under control with our level at 15 to 17%. Florida started to have to suffer the effect of greening. Citriculture in São Paulo then had most of the citricultures to choose to stop eliminating diseased plants. The greening system works based on two assumptions: the elimination of the inoculum source and the extremely strict control. If one of those two systems does not work well, the system in the long and midterm will collapse. Florida in no time adopted anything, no control of the vector insect, and no elimination. So we worked right from the beginning. We had success as nobody else in the world, and as of some time we chose some plants in older groves to stop eradicating and controlling the vector insect. The problem is that something else came up. Some products and molecules no longer were used. They were banned in the market, and we relaxed the control of the vector insect. It's impossible for you to kill all psyllids. The maximum you can reach is 90%. Climate was extremely favorable. Old groves had a high inoculum level, a lot of population of psyllids in the trees, so very effective. And then we started to have the perfect storm. And recently, in 2022, we, together with Esalq, detected for the first time in Brazil resistance to insecticides. That had happened in Mexico, Florida, but not here. So the insecticide that had 78% mortality came down to 30-40%. So what's the good news? Today, we have diagnosis that is precise of what's going on. We were blind last year. We knew some factors, the frequency, the quality of application, the inoculum, the old growths, but we didn't know that we had this problem with the insecticide resistance. And what's the good news? We have several insecticides that have good performance, and we know what to do. So we are going to pick up our efforts to control this disease. What's going to be the number? It's going to be better than last year's, I'm sure. What you see in green is the population of psyllid. What we see in the month, 6-8 months later, is going to cause systems. So we were really scared to see in young and mid-age growths is the reflex of the peak population of psyllid that took place from August to November. This is where we have shooting, and the insect will migrate and population will come to higher numbers because of the added factors we have mentioned here. What to do? This disease will, you see, in the system, actions will not work isolately. We have to have collective action. That's the way to go. So we do not do the same as other countries did. So what are the main causes? I would say that the main cause, number one, it seems obvious, but it's not seen as this, is the remaining of diseased plants in the field. Because if you do not have diseased plants, then psyllids will not contaminate the plant nearby. If you have a high percentage of diseased plants in your growths, then you're going to have the transmission source to yourself in your own farm. So this is the most difficult and complex, and the hardest action is the most important one. Second, planting growths next to a growth that is 5 meters high, be it your neighbor, where practically you cannot access the top spraying it. This is an illusion. It's an optical illusion. You think you're killing psyllid, but then you have still psyllids in the top of your canopy. So we have to lower the canopies, or you can use a drone or a crop duster. Otherwise, you're going to have a constant source of psyllid within your farm. Those two factors are vital. The choosing of the area is the number one factor of success, number two and number three. And if you plant in an area in the surroundings where your surroundings are not doing a good work, you're going to suffer the consequences. And here there's a very important point. The control of psyllid was doing very well, but then we added some other factors. Some molecules were no longer effective, the frequency decreased, plants had a more planting density, pulverization or spray-in went down in quality, and then we increased the population of psyllids exponentially. And today we have two molecules that present resistance. If we don't rotate that, maybe next day you're going to have the third and the fourth resistance, and then we're gonna have the gun but no bullet. And without that, we are practically in the 300, almost 310 million boxes. But you see the levels that we used to have came up to 380, 350. It's going down to 300, 310, 320, 30 million. And Florida, they had 2 million, 180, 150, are now down to 20 to 40. They had the effect of hurricane also this year, and but still that's too low. How do we work? Well, people question us, is this a good number, high number, low number? There's not low number, high number. We have science and statistics. We have number of trees, number of fruit, weight, fruit weight. It's an equation, and the fruit drop, and the correction factor. we are going to have an exact number. No, there is a variation. In this case, we had 316, 314 million. But if you have adverse climate, then the error is going to be higher. That's why we correct that during the crop. I apologize for recapping everything, but I'd like to thank you all here listed. I'd like to thank Dr. Monaco especially, that has been the president of this institution since 2008 and has brilliantly led all the work with the orange juice processors. And Vinicius Trombin, that is exceptionally leading this PASS team. Vinicius has been with us for 9 years, carrying out brilliant work together with Roseli, Fernando, and all the field team. I say that my part is the easiest, to come here, pass the message. The hard work is carried out by them. So, what about the survey? I'm going to be brief because I want to focus on more important topics. But I'd like to remind you that every 3 years we have the inventory, and in the last 2 years we have the sampling. Every 3 years is the complete survey. And then after that, we see what we planted and what we eradicated and the new areas. So with this 5% mathematically is something that will give us a very good idea what's going on. Besides that, kindly, the Secretary of Agriculture, Department of Agriculture, for the last 3 years have provided us with data on nursery plants produced in the state of São Paulo, marketed in the state of São Paulo, or sold abroad. We are going to show you for the first time the recently compiled data by the Department of Agriculture. We only do not have here the nursery plants for their own production and use on their own farms. So they don't need permit for transfer or traveling. So what happened in terms of farms that we visited, grows in this period? We are going to present data for you now. Fruit tree stripping was carried out in March, April, as late as possible to be as close to the final levels. So we have to do that later on. Another important point, the tree inventory. We use the data from the Department of Agriculture. We have the field data. We have the number of adult trees, number of fruit, because stripping is over, and then with the rains until April, early May, we are going to project the size. We have an equation today that is 90 to 93% correct due to the variables we're going to comment later on, and the fruit drop considering climate and the effect of diseases that we project according to the history and how we feel things are going to happen based on the disease data that we have. And for us to adjust everything, well, September we have the second estimate update, and then December another one, February, and then April with the last crop forecast estimate or forecast update. So we have the survey in the field, we have the fruit drop and diseases, we have data from the industry and ours, and fruit drop for all regions, as I said. Just to remind yourselves, everything is done in a stratified way. We have all the 336 cities divided into 12 regions or 5 sectors, proportionally in terms of the number of adult trees, variety, and irrigated area. Our figures is total number of oranges. That is it? No. We have oranges. There's more specific to table, like Bahias and also sweet lime that account for 3%. That is 11 million boxes. So besides the 309 million, we have this additional number. So here we segment oranges into early, mid-season, and late. Early Hamlin, Western Ruby, mid-season Pera, and late-season Valencia, Folha Murcha, and Natal. That is the latest one.
Para que a gente
For
tenha
us
acurácia,
to have accuracy, our growths have a lot of replants, so we have to stratify
como árvore, uma idade só, não tem-
growths according to their
idade de
age.
3 a 5, já começa a ter alguma
Four
coisa.
categories:
E a de 6 a 10 e acima
1
de
to
10,
2, 3 to 5, 6 to 10, and above 10. Here we have to see the plants not only
E para isso,
planted that year, but also replants from previous years. And for that, we have to have a sampling strategy that will take all that into consideration. Here we have each orange farm. This year, we haven't had work for lemon, mandarins, or acid limes. We just do that every 3 years for the tree inventory.
qual é
So, what is our situation today?
o número,
The number of adult trees is practically the same,
tá? 560 hectares a mais.
560 hectares more
Quando você soma
extra. And when we add it all, we have almost 2 million trees more because we planted more table orange.
tudo, quando a gente
So
avalia
when we
de forma
analyze it in a way that is more generic, number of adult trees has stabilized.
Mas e para frente?
But
E o futuro?
what about the future? What comes on next? We have 5 sectors.
Aonde que estão os setores
Where
que mais
are the
impactam
sectors that mostly impact
nos
citriculture
próximos 387 mil hectares?
in the next 387 hectares?
Então, Araraquara,
Number 1, central region or sector. Jaú, Araraquara, 107. North
cresceu.
has grown 90,000 hectares. And the southwest, third one. The
Esses 3 setores
3 sectors
então, praticamente
dictate 75% to 80% of the crop. What about the south region, Limeira, that was the heart of Orange or Porto Ferreira? That has been the one that is mostly affected by greening, with low smallholders, more farms. So this area has decreased. So here we have south and southwest with a little decrease, or northwest, and the north and center with a little, a slight increase trend. Here again, adult
e o sul
grows, center and south, where the greening, especially in the south, the greening has a higher incidence.
o número vem caindo.
This number has dropped. And the southwest, with better climate, and the citrus growers wanted to have a more yield, had migrated,
E o norte mais ou menos está.
so has this increase of 2.9.
Caiu a. Vamos esperar restabelecer.
Let's go back to the
Agora
slide.
vamos falar dos pomares.
So now let's talk to new plantings. Can I have the slide, please?
Peço pouco de paciência.
Let's please be patient. Never happened, so sometimes it happens.
Respirar pouco.
So let's take a deep breath.
Vamos lá, voltando. E os
Okay.
pomares em
So what
formação?
about the mature growths? That's our future. That's what's going on today. The plantings of today is our mature growths of tomorrow. So let's look at this carefully. First,
O que aconteceu de forma
what happened in general? We increased
18%
almost
e meio
18.5% the growths
formação.
that
Aonde
are
cresceu mais?
newly planted, especially in the north and central areas. Citricultures are not dumb. In the last 2 years, they chose the most isolated areas with the more distance from the greening. Then we had growth. You see the 6,000 hectares were present in those 2 sectors. Southwest, that grew a lot, had a little decrease this time. You see it's yellow in some regions. Northwest, more or less stable, grew a little bit.
E o sul
And the south
sentiu o impacto aí,
felt the
mais ou
impact.
menos, número próximo do que vinha
Is
sendo.
close to, but was close to what was before. What about varieties? Pera,
É a variedade que tá mais
that is
valorizada,
the
mais carente.
most valued and needed variety, has increased continuously. And Valencia Americana, that is very high yield, although it has lower quality, also had a
As demais, a oscilação.
growing or increase trend. And those are the other varieties. What about planting density?
mostra para nós
Time shows what's better.
sempre foi
It-
os porta-enxertos que
We
nós
always have had the
melhor espaçamento existente
rootstock that will allow us to have 500 average plants per hectare as density. With the grading coming in as of 2004 and the fear of our losing plants, there's been a trend of having a faster payback. So we increase density. That make you make more money at first. But then what rootstock, what scion? And we have seen that the trend for the last 4 or 5 years
queda buscando
has been of a decrease coming to levels of 550 plants, and that's the level that we have today as average.
qual é o risco do
What's the risk?
qual que é a vantagem, qual que é a
Or
desvantagem?
and the advantage and disadvantage of a higher planting density. If you have a growth
Que o porta-enxerto
where
menos
the
vigoroso
rootstock is less vigorous and will allow you to have higher density, that's the best of the world. So you're going to have more plants, more return. Only when you have higher planting density, then you have to have pruning
desde o princípio.
management that is perfect from the beginning. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to spray at the right time. You're going to have continuous shooting. The top of the canopy is going to be hard to reach. And then we start to feel this dilemma. So spacing today has been revisited and should be so due to the rootstock of each region, if there is a greening or not, because the psyllid, the transmitting insect, will only transmit to new shoots. 90% of it happens in the new shoots. When the shoots are mature, it's 10% only. So if you plant along the year, you have to be more careful with your spray-ins. That's one point. And what happened in terms of planting?
Nós estamos
We have the highest number in history of plantings in those years here. You see, it's above 2007. That was 28.4 thousand. So
maiores índices de plantio
we picked up the highest level of plantings that took place 12, 15 years ago. And this trend has been so for the last few years. Why is that so? Because we have new replants. Old groves that have collapsed due to greening, we have to remake them.
Então, nós vamos mostrar o número.
So we're going to show you planting and eradication per region and sector.
Observem que
You can see
o que está em
that
azul,
what's in blue is planting. What is in orange is eradication.
onde ocorreram as maiores erradicações.
Highest eradication levels took place in Duartina.
Região de alto
That is
índice
a
de grande
high
quantidade,
greening incidence, larger farms, more than 40,000 hectares. Porto Ferreira, high. Limeira
e Matão.
and Matão.
Existe uma
There is a
coincidência
coincidence.
aonde os índices de
That is,
incidência do greening
where
maior,
greening
com
incidence is
exceção do
higher,
oeste,
with the exception of Northwest, because of drought and other factors, the eradication has been higher. And where is planting going to? In the region of Matão, there was a crop-free area. It came up to 22% of greening. Last year was 9. We had islands of areas with no growth. The best region became one of the worst.
manejar doença e conviver em qualquer situação.
And you can manage the disease as long as we follow recommendations. If we repeat the mistake, the error, you're going to sink. But Matão is an example that could keep 1%, 2%, 3% a year when there is one rigorous control in the farm and the region. Alone, it's not enough. So Avaré grew a lot. Duartina as well. In the region of Matão and Araraquara, we had more plantings. But you see that the game has changed a bit. Citriculture goes through waves. In the sudden death and CVC, we had no citriculture in the south, in the west, Minas Gerais. Citriculture migrated to southwest. And then greening devastated São Carlos region. and went to northwest with more yield. The climatic condition to psyllid and greening is more favorable in the central south. So we had the migration as well. There was the yellow light. So citrus growers have to look year by year where to go. Just a comment here. Itapetininga. Itapetininga has a good figure, and the west Minas Gerais, that is practically isolated region due to a sudden death and CVC in the past, almost double its planting because of being isolated, although they have more adverse climate in terms of yield and water availability. What's the scenario we have? What's the reality? Increased incidence and severity of greening. The problem with greening is that when it reaches a new plant 3 years, it will destroy the growth. If it's an adult tree, 12 years, it will cause a false illusion. And in 5-6 years, we are going to have the results of that. Renato Bazanese has all the data for the varieties. What happened in Florida, in China, in São Paulo is all the same. There's no change among varieties. The most important factor is the time of infection. Plants that are very young will succumb very soon. Adult plants will take longer to reach 30% of the production that would have as a potential. What's the main dilemma? Those that have 10 to 15-year-old growth producing 100 or 1,300 boxes won't want to eliminate that plot, because the orange is paying as never before, highest levels. But the combination of planting a young growth next to a contaminated growth, I wouldn't say that it's mission impossible, but it's almost impossible. And you're going to have a knife through your throat 365 days a year. If in one half month, a month, because of a rain or some product, chemical that didn't work, even if you're very rigorous, if you make one mistake, all your young growth may be contaminated in half a month. That has to be taken into consideration. When I had the privilege to talk to Mr. Beauvais, people wouldn't understand. This man knew each country in the world. He visited each country like 10 times. In the board meeting 2004, he said, "You never faced anything close to this. Greening, wherever it comes in, has decimated growth. There's no more or less damage. Do your best to keep going." And we asked him, "Is it possible to control this?" He said, "I don't know. I believe so. If there is a citrus grower in the São Paulo or Minas citrus growing, we can manage the disease." But then we relaxed, and now we are going to have also the problem back again, and we have to go on managing the disease until we have a plant that is resistant, but we do not have that yet. So Limeira, Avaré, Brotas, Duartina, we have growths up to 3 years. 60% of our citrus area is there represented, and we have areas like Bebedouro that has been affected by greening, and we have areas like Altinópolis, the region of Jales, that until last year had levels below 1%, started to have exponential growth because they were not eradicating or controlling the vector insect. Smallholders. This disease has no barriers in any state of Brazil. Psyllids will be present, and so will the disease. What changes is the speed. Areas that are colder and more moist, like Capão Bonito, the population of psyllid is lower, more adverse condition to psyllids. Triângulo Mineiro, Mato Grosso do Sul, more drought, and you see, but psyllid will be there too, even though not as intense. 40 to 45% of commercial plants have greening. It's there. So you plant a grove. If you don't have sanitation measures and you relax, greening will be there. So this is the most important picture of our Brazilian citriculture. I am not trying to scare you. I'm very optimistic. CVC has reached 45% of our plants. You know how much we have today? 0.5%. We don't even have that in a plant in the field, a plant with CVC. The only place in the world that has been able to survive is here. So this is the worst situation that we can see in a grove. 1,000 boxes, 1,200 boxes, and then there was a beautiful grove, and then 2 months ago we have like 20–40% of plants eradicated. Do you know how many phone calls I get every day? You don't even want to know. Because I feel as if it's my grove, it's a mission. So we have some lessons to learn here. In life, I always have tried to learn from the wise people, and I have had the privilege of having Dr. Monaco, Demerval, masters like Beauvais, and I always try to learn from them. And what's going on? Citrus growers always wanted to plant close to citrus processing units, of course, reduce costs, because freight is expensive, right? So Limeira, Matão, Bebedouro, but then what happened? This is the snapshot of this year, CDA. 15.4 million plants, 1.5 outside São Paulo, without mentioning the nursery plants of other nurseries. In Minas, for instance, it's not part of that math. In Bahia, not part of the math. So here is what we have moving out of São Paulo, and then we have another million. So the size of the orange circle is more or less the weight of each region for the weighted numbers. So suppose I am in an isolated area, no orange trees in 10,000 meters. So my risk is what? Almost zero. That's why people call me and ask, do I plant orange? What are my priorities? First is the choosing of the area. Second, choosing of the area. Third, choosing of the area. Then you think of the rest. Because if you plant under conditions where the whole surrounding area is contaminated, you know how your success rate is? Zero. There's no technology available in the world for you to plant orange, even if you spray every 3 or 5 days, if you do not have a regional work. There's no way. The world has not discovered that. And that's what's described in Florida when they decided to plant large scale. There's no technology for that. And then what happens? Citriculture started to move away. Citrus growers are wise. We have other crops and we have different difficulties. That happened. Tristeza has ruined citriculture already, but nothing compares to greening. And then what? Is there anything that we can learn from the world? Hard to believe, but I went to China 4 times. 99, first time I saw greening in my life. The largest Chinese project planted by Tropicana, 1.2 million plants. The project stopped. I was part of that decision because there was no technology at the time. 7% of plants contaminated in a 3 to 4 year old growth. 6 years later, 100% of plants had greening. How would that work in China in 2009 and 8? It was a nomad citriculture, just like papaya. You plant a little bit here, and then a little bit there. And then tangerine, guava, small citriculture, fruit sold by kilo, a fortune, 98%. I never saw a country to transform more than China. When I went there, it was just bicycles, and then motorbikes, and then cars, and now luxury cars. In 2013, they came here to learn from us. They start to change the nursery system and start to eradicate and control psyllid. The Chinese people that came here in 2006, they had 9 provinces with the presence of greening, but had 10 without. So what did the Chinese do? Started to choose the areas with not a lot of citrus, no greening. And then what happened to the citriculture in China in 15 years? It grew 250%. It's producing almost 1.4 billion. So the citriculture is in the third world. Yes, we still have that, but there are places where they modernize and catch up. So citriculture worldwide, it's not going to end. It is going to, rather, until we have the resistant plants, to change owner. Because you see, orange is the most complex crop. Agronomist that is a manager of an orange farm will do anything. There's nothing more complex, nothing else more complex. So it will change region, and we have to learn what we did in Araraquara. You go back when you have the conditions for that. You have to have a crop-free area, 50 kilometers. We know all that, but it's hard to put into practice. So I couldn't fail to make this presentation without mentioning all this. Beauvais was the most brilliant guy I met in my life. He had 2 Nobel Prizes. And if you got to know him, people would say he is, way beyond or, ahead of everyone else. Everything he told me is taking place or will take place. First, Florida is going to succumb, Juliano. That's what happened. Not all the money we have will solve. Maybe science is slower than we would like, but if we invest $1.3 billion in Florida, you know what we invested here? 5% of that. Florida has 16 million. We have 310 million. Why is that so? Because of the mind of citrus growers, because of Fundecitrus stand, because of what we learned from the past. And what we have today in terms of concrete actions to cure a plant, to have a resistant plant, unfortunately, today, nothing. We will have, but we still don't. So there's just one way to go, to follow management doing your best. Florida has no way to go, no way out. North is cold, right or left are not options. China has where to move, and we have as well, and we have more isolated areas in São Paulo. So this mapping here has been done by our team, taking into consideration psyllids, plant density, incidence of diseases, and you see that we have 84 regions. Those are very distinct situations from one place to the other. Not only regions, but also sometimes you are in a region and your farm is isolated. It is in kilometers, kilometers away from one or another orange tree. So it's a micro-region that is favorable. So the world, it goes beyond São Paulo and west-southwest Minas Gerais. So Beauvais said, divide the risk. We have the laboratory, we are working as crazy to find the resistance plant. Now we have CRISPR and resistance sources. We are working on that. Second, Juliano, my friends, my partners, one day will limit the use of insecticides. It might be that you have the gun with no bullet. You're going to have fewer bullets. That started to happen. And probably in a while, you're going to have resistance to insecticides. Everything was predicted. So we are trying to find a new molecule, having rotation, finding where best place to plant, but we do not have the power of making decision. The decision is in the hands of the citrus growers. So here we have trees in a higher density. And what about the crop forecast? What are the factors that we take into consideration? Again, 1,555 trees, older, younger, different types of trees. I'm not going to spend time on this. But what happened in the number of fruit per tree? Bebedouro, Altinópolis, we had the increased number of production. And then where we had the higher crop before, where we had the crops that was higher last year, went down this year. And some people say, well, we had a crop loss, or some people say, oh, we have an increased crop, because one year is on and the other year is off. Numbers are really reliable, and that's because of the work of Barbosa. Barbosa, I'm going to say something. Barbosa is my advisor. I have a friend that says, well, he's kind of quiet, but let me tell you something. There's the highest IQ at Unesp. He's going to say no, but he won't make any mistakes in our figures. So this figure here has a variation of 16% more or plus or minus. So it's a very good stratification, and 2.6% is the margin of error. And here we have distinct worlds. Altinópolis almost doubled the production. They're really happy. Avaré, Itapetininga, 20% lower crop. Distinct situations because of the grain. And number of fruit also correlated to that. In the north, 23% more fruit. Southwest, 21% less. What about varieties? Only Pera kept stable practically. All the other ones went down. But what caused crop loss this year was Natal and the south and southwest region, where the crop decreased. That's the explanation. But because of the climate being good, the fruit are going to grow. So we have an offset effect. So we will have to deal with the fruit drop. Then that depends on the climate and diseases. Here, just would like to say that this number is not only calculated for adult plants. We have difference between different stratum situation. Here we have different plots. It's all present in the report. You can refer to that. And then the bloom profile has changed a little bit as compared to last year's. Last year was 28%, the first bloom. This year is 36%. It grew. The number of fruit from the first bloom grew. So first and second, 82% of the crop. So the third has a medium effect, and the fourth is negligible, almost. The bloom profile, it's a salad. Each region has a different situation, irrigated area, how much it rained and not. So we have here totally different realities. Votuporanga 64%, and you have other situations like Duartina 47% and the first bloom. So each situation is different. Now, how much do we have in terms in orange? Considering each bloom, next to 255 million in the first and second blooms put together, out of the 309 million. It should be a crop that starts a little bit earlier, where we have, and it's faster then, and that favors the decrease of fruit drop. But we have greening. And greening will not forgive time. It will drop fruit 60 days before. And that's the game we have to play. But we will depend on the climate. What about fruit size projection? People working in math, do whatever they wanted that we are not able to. But we have here a correlation of 90%. Last year was 92%. And so here we have the number of fruit, the fruit weight at stripping, and the accumulated rainfall from May to July, and the sum of first and second blooms. And if we add it all together, then we have 90% of correct result. So climate goes beyond what we expected in terms of participation. We have a forecast for the weather to still be rainy. We have the hypothesis of 150 millimeters May, June, and July. If we have more rain, the fruit will grow more. If we have lower rain, not so much. That's the hypothesis we consider. Average size, 165 grams. Heavier than that in the last 5 previous crops. Not as big, but significant. So that's why we have this level of crop that is a little bit below, but almost the same. What about fruit drop? That's harder to project. This is a game that depends on our playing year after year. Remember, Florida got it right every year, but then after greening, they didn't get it right anymore. That's more or less the same. If you don't measure this, and we have been measuring this, we have an equation that helps to estimate what's going to happen. Hardly to believe, in 2022, fruit borer and fruit fly were the most significant factors. But now we have greening that's going to surpass that. They are almost in the similar levels. The other causes, this is more than 50%. Then we have a physiological drop, mechanical, we have creasing, canker. So what was the parameter that we have adopted? See, climate is good, doing good. The crop is faster, so the greening is going to, the fruit drop is going to be lower. In theory, yes, but we have greening that is increasing in incidence and severity. So we are going to have a counterbalance. So we are going to have a similar number that will correct later on as we go. What happens to fruit drop rate? Why does greening decrease yield? Because it decreases the number of fruit, it decreases the weight of fruit, and it increases fruit drop. This is one of the factors. You see there that in Limeira, 63% of the fruit that drops is because of greening. What about in the Triângulo? 0. And what about the other 2 most affected regions, Porto Ferreira and Brotas? 40%. So there is a correlation between fruit drop rate and greening. The more greening, the more fruit drop. So here we have the weight of each regions in this math. Regions that are more affected. This is August last year data, and it's late, so we are starting the survey now, right? So this is the reality 12 months ago. So now here, Porto Ferreira, a week ago, we have started stripping. Because of greening, fruit drop. I don't know if you're good at math, but Renato's father has a doctorate program in math, so he probably knows math as well. I said, Renato, do the math. I can just add 1 plus 1. So he ended up creating this direct correlation, showing that what would be our incidence? Well, in theory, 24 would go up to levels of 30% because we have eradication and this and that. It can be even more. Well, 27 to 33. What about the fruit drop rate? 5.6 to almost 7 because it's increasing. And that's, the reason why we increase this fruit drop, because of those factors. Now, equation for crop forecast. Bearing trees, fruits per tree, drop rate, almost the same, a little bit lower, and fruits per box, 6 grams above last year's. The whole math came up to those 309 million with those areas with increase or decrease and or stability. Yield by sector. It's not only fruit per tree, but also have to see ton per hectare. Northwest, or the north region, had this increase. In the southwest, where we had 1,000, 1,100, went down to 850. This is what changed in our citrus growing area due to those explanations that I provided you with before. Yield, Natal minus 16, the other ones with a little trend to be same or higher. And then the final table. 310 million boxes with this yield. And what if we look at the world? How is it going?
concorrente,
our competitors. Florida,
que produzia 1.100
that used to produce 1,200, is producing 10% of that now, 125 ton. But there is the hurricane effect as well here, right? Not only the greening. This level should be next to 300. This is a bias that we have to analyze as well. And our figures next to 750,000, varying according to the property or region, or the farm or region. With all that, our yield is increasing. So are we fine? No. The game is just starting. The inflection point for citriculture. Well, last year we had we had the cover of our journal saying red alert. Today is like darker red alert. Can we change the game? Yes, it depends on each one of us. There's no other solution. You cannot kind of do it. You have to do it, And we have to include everyone. We have this lion that is very hungry, and we have to take care of it. Let me break my presentation a little bit, otherwise we're just talking about problems. So what about this yield of ours? Could it be better, higher? Yes, because we have other factors. Look at the world. 330, that's what we produced before. Now is the adding of São Paulo and Minas. So greening came in, consumption changed. Today we have a fruit. What about its quality? And we have a shortage of orange juice in the market. We have to be really competent to produce. But finally, what I'd like to say is, what if we hadn't had this little monkey to steal orange and this macaque to affect our yield? Would our production be higher? Not only it's just the pest and disease, right? No other country in the world has higher sustainability level as we have. We have a legal reserve in our farms. Dr. Lado is finishing work that is precious in terms of carbon stock, and we are a reference in the world. So citriculture in Brazil, the state of São Paulo, has to be proud because we are a reference in everything. We are the largest production of orange juice in the world, and that's the reason for that. And greening, we have to defeat it. That's my message. And then Dr. Lauro will tell you the story about why this story is so important. This is the work together with Embrapa, and we carried out Fundecitrus and Embrapa, and it's a beautiful work that is very important. Thank you so much. Juliano always teaches us a class with super precious information, and how good it is to know how our citriculture is bringing positive impact to the planet, preserving fauna and flora and stocking carbon. It's this very nice work carried out by Embrapa as a partner of Fundecitrus. Embrapa, you all know, is internationally acknowledged in its work. Now I'd like to tell you that I went there to see one of the farms, to visit one of the farms that helped us with the survey data on carbon stock. And I was well impressed with the care they have for the environment, fauna, and flora in benefit of sustainability. I went to Santa Cruz do Rio Pardo in the inner part of the state of São Paulo. I would like you to see the work they carry out on this farm. Guaxu Farm, April 26, 2023. Fundecitrus, in partnership with Embrapa, has come up with a study that was funded by Innocent Drinks that has the purpose of quantifying the carbon stock in the production of citrus in the states of São Paulo and Minas Gerais. For that, we have collected data, biometric data of orange trees and thousands of citrus farms. Two of them stand out because of their contribution. They offered whole trees for the analysis of carbon. And today I am in one of those farms in the inner part of São Paulo, in Santa Cruz do Rio Pardo. Here, technical people could work and analyze how much a tree of this, such as this, will store in carbon from the root system to the top leaves. I think this is a development that is very significant for you to have precise parameters, let's say, for you to measure the importance or the collaboration of the citrus crop to the carbon stock. But why do you think it's important for you to have data like this for citrus crop? How do you see this relevance of citrus in the general scenario? If you go to the agronomic side of it, the more organic matter, the more carbon you have stored, especially in the soil, indirectly or directly, you have more possibility in terms of yield per hectare. ESG on the farm. All rules that are in place in the country according to the Forest Code, 20% reserve, we have 25% of reserve. We take care of all riparian areas, both including fauna and flora. So we have this as a value that is part of our DNA, because we see, first, that it's a good business, second, it will value your assets in terms of quality, and third, we are coming up with metrics for you to start valuing the sequestered carbon. In terms of social aspects, we have safety for human beings, because we have all the positive practices in place to avoid accidents, to promote health in the long term of our co-workers, and so on and so forth. There is a social aspect. It's important, because people that are here on a daily basis are the ones that make it happen and come up with all the parameters and figures we are talking about right now. So I think that's vital. Just for us to end our talk, sustainability, this concept that is so wide, as you have mentioned as example in our talk, circular economy, virtuous cycle. How do you see those concepts within the agribusiness in Brazil? The importance of thinking along those lines. This is something that is a topic that is being highly discussed in the agri-business community. If you look at the chain as a whole, in using waste, in orange you have the juice, bagasse, and the essential oils. The bagasse, we have a livestock production here, and the cattle, 20-30% of its feed has the orange bagasse as a raw material. The cattle waste will be used in composting, and will enrich that with some rocks, bacteria, fungi that is beneficial, and then we go back, we take back that nutrition, that part as nutrition to our growth, right? So there's no way for us to move on without looking at the environmental impact, to carbon stock, the carbon footprint, right? Yeah, I think this is this is the way to go, and there's no way back. Fundecitrus thanks Agroterrenas and Citrussuco for their collaboration. Beautiful, right? Really cool, this work they carry out in terms of sustainability. Those are the type of initiative that will make a difference and will renew the commitment of the sector to sustainability. Reports are going to be released in full very soon. We are going to bring all the information to the sector, and today the researcher with Embrapa is here with us, the researcher that worked with us in this work study carried out is here with us. You can send your questions, be it in person or through the chat. We have 300 people listening to this crop announcement in Portuguese, and many more listening to the English version. Now it's a beautiful time in our meeting. We would like to acknowledge the work of a person that dedicated his whole life to citriculture. We want to talk about sustainability and use sustainability for Fundecitrus to pay homage to this doctor from the University of California, Dr. Dorival Carmo Monaco. Dr. Monaco has a long history related to the advocating good agricultural practices and valuing the whole productive chain, and he is part of this productive chain as well. And nothing is better than for us to take advantage of this time of this joint work with Embrapa that has sustainability as a focus to pay homage to Dr. Monaco. This cultural change to new generations has everything to do with the trajectory of Dr. Monaco. Please, Dr. Monaco, join us together with the representatives of your family, Lorival Carmo Monaco Jr., your son, and your grandchildren, Leandro and Talita. Please join me here. Congratulations. Thank you. And for this tribute, I'd like to invite Juliano. Dr. Monaco, I'm very proud of everything, your work, and thank you so much for being here with us. I would like Juliana and Dr. Monaco to please stay here so that we can move on to the Q&A session. Thank you. Dr. Monaco, please. Let's now proceed to the Q&A session. Right now we are going to go proceed to a very important time at our meeting, that is to clarify the questions you may have. After all, PASS is done for you, and it's vital for us to clarify any questions you may have about the 2023-2024 orange crop. Questions and answers. Now I'd like to invite to join Dr. Monaco and Juliano, the Executive Coordinator of PES, Vinícius Trombin, from Marques Strat, Professor of Unesp and Coordinator of the Statistics Area of Unesp, José Carlos Barbosa, Lauro Rodrigues Nogueira, Researcher from Embrapa, and online by video conference also we have the Political, Institutional and Methodological Coordinator linked to Marques Strat and full professor at USP and FGV, Marcos Fava Neves. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. So let's start with you here in person. If you'd like to ask a question to those experts we have together here with us today, please raise your hand. I'm gonna make sure you have a microphone so you can ask your questions. So let's make the most of this time. Don't be shy. That's the time. People are laughing here, but it's true. Remember, Juliano, that there was the case of in the workshop as well. First, people are shy, but then after the first question, everyone will feel more comfortable. So who's the first one to ask a question? Okay, let me make your lives easier. I'm going to ask the first question, okay? And then you get carried away and you ask your own questions. Juliana, I'm going to ask with you. I know that in your presentation you talked a lot about greening, but we can never talk enough about it, the importance of fighting greening. So how do you see, what perspective you have for the future of citriculture with the current situation of greening? I'm going to go back to emphasize the points, but I'm going to be brief because I want to give time to everyone to participate in this discussion. I told you that we are going through an inflection time, but fortunately we have a lot of knowledge. We know what is, produces good and bad results. So all industry should come together, and citrus growers. It's a problem of the country, and we have to really put into practice whatever has to be done in a joint way. In the mid and long term, problems, will not have any miraculous solution. We have research and development, and research will bring solution, but in the mid and long short and mid-term, we have everyone together. And Fundecitrus will continue to be here to support you on everything under the leadership of Dr. Monaco and the whole team. So let's look at the world with optimism. We moved from 45% of CVC down to 1% in greening. We still have 75% of plants that are healthy. So we can look at the glass half full or half empty. I always try to look at the good side of it, the bright side. Let's believe. And we have farms and companies that have 99% of a healthy plant. So it is possible. Knowledge is here. Let's use it. Thank you. What now? Have you decided to ask a question? Have you been encouraged? One question. Microphone is reaching you. Good morning. I am Rubens from Getaque. Juliano, people in Florida is very excited with biologicals because it seems that it's providing good results. Does Fundecitrus have any work on that? What can you tell me about it? We have to be really careful with the preliminary information. Antibiotics have been used in the 70s in the South Africa. At first it produced good results, but then it caused problems of resistance and toxicity. Evidently today antibiotics are other types with different forms of application. Fundecitrus is very much involved in this. We have tests carried out under controlled conditions. We have permission requested for tests in the field, but my message is be careful. Florida has solved the problem with nutrition, thermal therapy, with the rootstock, with varieties, and now it's producing 16,000 boxes. So we have to, try everything. We are trying new alternatives to minimize the effect of the disease and in its incidence and severity. We do not have information yet that are concrete and can confirm their hypothesis. So my message to you is, do not get confused. Follow the management that you know will produce results. In the mid and long term, we are going to have alternatives, but not today. Another question? Question to Juliano. During your presentation, sometimes you hinted that it might be that we'll have a transgenic plant, and maybe there will be this silver bullet. How long do you think this work will result in that plant, and this plant is made available to Brazilian citriculture? This is the question that I am mostly asked every day. I would like to be more prepared to answer that. But I would say that, do you know how many woody fruit plants have reached resistance so far by means of transgenics? None. But we will get there. I'm just telling you how big this challenge is. You think it's lack of money that caused us not to have it? 1.3 billion have been invested by the United States for that. This problem, sometimes some problems go beyond our capacity. For you to solve such a problem of this complexity, you have to have the best of the world with you. We have a consortium between Brazil and Europe. We have people from Spain, the best ones, France, England, Australia,
dos Estados Unidos.
the United States, here, Brazil. So what do you have in fact?
Desde 2016,
Since 2016 and we confirm in 2019, we have species in the citrus
nós não tínhamos isso.
family that are confirmed to be resistant. We had lemon and everything, Sicilian acid lime, but the citrus in Australia is resistant. Our team is going to Australia in 10 days to consolidate this consortium in Australia. That's the most important one for us to save time with the researchers in Brazil, France, and Spain. I won't be there because I'll be here in a very
Nós temos
delicate moment. So we have the opportunity of having the genes.
daqui a 5, 7, 8
We don't know if it's in 5 or 8 years. So, but we have to identify the genes that are responsible to provide resistance. Europe won't accept
sim, a China
transgenics today. So if you have an orange tree that is resistant but is transgenic, I couldn't sell juice to Europe. That is the major consumer. But there's good news. There is a little change
Inglaterra já está aceitando.
that is accepted by England already, and probably Europe as a whole will accept as well. So if I can identify the gene or genes and develop this tool to insert the resistance genes or delete, it might be one or other, then we'll have it.
Uso comercial
But in commercial use,
tem que ser testado.
we have to test that. It has to be validated. We won't have that in the field in less than 10 years.
Nós temos que fazer a
We have to cross that time. We have the best ones. We are all focused. Let's do it. 10 years go by fast. So we have to move on. But there's no use for me to say that in 3 or 5 years we are going to have that. Unfortunately, that's not going to be enough time. It's extremely complex. We're making thousands of hybrids looking for resistance genes here and in the world. I'm going to ask a question as a journalist, as a question to Lauro. I think it's important to everyone here because I was really curious in relation to this important survey on the carbon stock when I went to that farm. Carbon stock, of course, has immense importance in relation to environmental impact, but has the other side of it, that is the economic side. I'd like, Lauro, for you to explain to citrus growers that are here with us how this study may make it easier. For instance, the selling of carbon credits. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me, for having me, and for this, for your acknowledging of our work. It's a pleasure to be here to answer questions. In terms of the carbon stock, it has an important relation with sustainability. The farmer that we visited, Fazenda Guacho farm, you know, he mentioned the organic matter in the soil and all that. In our work, besides quantifying carbon in the areas and groves and the conservation areas, we also have a pricing of carbon by means of some models to see what a social cost of carbon is, a CO2 equivalent being released into the atmosphere, how much it will cost and bring us benefits. Carbon credits is something very complex for us to talk about. You have to have a project, you have to go to the official and voluntary markets, and so it's a longer process. I see as benefits the payment according to environmental benefits. That is something that the Department of Environment has dealt with already. So we quantify how much carbon we have stored on farms, how much can be sequestered, that is, how much we can remove from the atmosphere and store in trees and soil. So we come up with a value, a figure to see how much can be paid for that to citrus farmers for the carbon sequestered in the soil and plants, in the conservation areas and groves. So we are still coming up with the figures for us to have a price, a value that may be used by institutions and companies, the government, for us to pay citrus farmers in the future for this benefit to the environment. Any other questions in the auditorium?
Bom dia.
Good morning.
Minha pergunta seria a seguinte:
My question is,
cenário de mudanças climáticas
in this climate change scenario that we live through, what are the perspectives for greening
algumas regiões que hoje em
in some regions that today have adverse climate may have then changed to favorable climate in the future? Those are my concerns.
De quem?
Especificamente para alguém, a pergunta
Who is your question to?
e no fundo a pessoa.
Não, acredito que
I believe that it might be any of you that would like to answer.
Retos. O que nós sabemos sobre o efeito
What do we know in terms of the effect of a climate in greening? Every disease has a very strong environmental effect. Today we can measure that. That is, temperatures above 38 degrees, 36 degrees Celsius
concentração de bactéria dentro da laranjeira?
provides a concentration of bacteria in the citrus decreased. It's hard for the insect to acquire the organism and transmit it. Under cold conditions, it's also adverse, like in Capão Bonito. The insect cycle, when you have a situation that is intermediate of a more moderate climate, then you have faster cycles
Crescimento
and
maior da população.
a higher growth of the population. But what's important for us to keep in mind is that climatic change
Elas são sutis.
is subtle.
O clima tinha mudado, que só ia
People say climate has changed, but
nessas 3 décadas.
it's not over. We have had one of the most, the rainiest years in the 3 decades. So, will climate interfere in greening? Yes. It interferes in the spread of propagation, not in the presence or absence. Just like CVC in Santa Cruz, Itapetininga, didn't occur. And then sudden death only took place in Barretos and Triângulo. Greening has the means to be present in practically all states in Brazil, since Rio Grande do Sul up to northeastern and north states. But the thing is, sometimes some areas still it is not present. Greening is not present. It may take decades. How long has greening been in China? It's a continent.
10 ou 9 províncias.
It's present in 9 or 10 provinces. And in other 9 or 10, we do not have greening, not even the psyllid. So we do have competitive advantage. And something else,
Totalmente distinto você ter uma
it's
propriedade
totally different for you to have a farm and that is greening free, and you have a sea of orange trees around it. So
Nós temos que usar o clima
we have to use climate not as a barrier, but in a wise way, an smart way to our favor. Good morning, everyone.
Primeiro, parabéns pela
First, congratulations on your presentation. My question is to Professor Marcos. Looking at the scenario in Florida, the scenario
do Brasil, né,
of Brazil,
exponencial
the exponential growth that we have had of the disease at this time. If we look at the production chain of opportunities opportunity, in the scenario of opportunities and risks, what do you see for citrus? Thank you so much for your question. I hope you can hear me fine. I would like to sum up this market scenario, what you can bring home as a message, starting from this announcement of 310 million boxes. The points to consider, and I thank you for your question, in terms of the production chain, are orange. First, we have 5 topics, 2 or 3 minutes I'd like to talk to you. First, benefits to society. I think it's evident by this presentation given. Orange brings us $2 million a year. Just for you to have an important number to talk to other people, you know how much Brazil exports in orange juice per minute? 20,000 reais. It's an interesting number, right, that we bring per minute. So you can calculate that since the beginning of this meeting today, how much we made. The creation of jobs and sustainability, benefits to society, is my first point to your to answering your question. So here we have a generation of tax and all the tax and jobs created. Now, if we talk about the supply side, in all meetings of PES, I think this is the most severe time. We have 330 million boxes if we add the two suppliers in the planet, 16 there, 309 here. Stocks are low, so this is the worst time in terms of supply that we have been through. Remember the time where we have 600 million boxes. Now we have 330 with a larger world, with more wealth, right? It was very nicely mentioned, the whole greening situation. Maybe we can learn more about the poultry area and the pork production. So it all has to do with this. Another important thing is that research shows us that investment is coming. We have a 7,000 new hectares, 21,000 new hectares in being planted. If you add it all, it's a great news. And for you citrus growers, good news is also the reduction of the cost of inputs. We are going through a very important reduced price of inputs and freight as well. If you have to export containers, that's a reduced price item as well. And in terms of supply, we have also to include management and research. We have to work with the CRISPR technology. You that visited the Agri-Show, you saw interesting things. I saw a robot that will go through the citrus area and will attract insects and will electrocute insects. So it's something nice that we can think of. I believe in science and innovation and technology. I think the problem of the supply is something we can solve. And I closed my second topic by saying this is the most severe moment that we face in the world in terms of supply. Now, demand. In the production chain, what we can talk about demand, I believe that orange juice in the next 12 months is going to be from $2.2 to $3 million in Europe because of the problem of item 2 that I just mentioned. What does that mean? We have to see the behavior of consumption. That is my third item, demand. Europe, that is our major consumption area, is still going through the impact of the pandemic. We have uncertainty also with the war taking place at this time. We have mines and farms. It's impossible for us to believe almost that this is going on at this time today. And also we have the bottling of the juice, in terms of blending, how they're going to position themselves, because they are multi-juice in Europe, for instance. Another important point in the demand is the internal domestic market in Brazil, where we have had good performance and we effectively show the position of the orange juice. And what do I understand from this? The premium juice, 100% juice, will increasingly be more available for those that are able to pay, that can afford it. They're not worried about money. Just get the 100% juice and put it in the cart in the supermarket. And then we're going to have nectars and blends as the major part, unfortunately, because of this problem of supply. And what do citrus growers expect in terms of price? This is my fourth point because of time constraints. 40 reais per box is something that we may expect for the maybe 2 or 3 years next. What concerns me is the exchange rate. I think the 4.7, it would be the exchange rate that we expect. It will change in the second half of the year in terms of the amount in reais that we receive, but I'm very excited about the carbon factor. In AgriShow, people were already receiving $33 per hectare because of carbon fixation from one year to the other. This is a huge opportunity to citric culture. Eugenio mentioned something really important. And also the circular economy that I was also mentioned. Management per square meter or per plant is something that we'll be able to manage so that the price paid to citrus growers will be something that is profitable. The last point I'd like to comment with you, almost finishing this meeting today, is the institutional aspect. And here I'd like to congratulate you all, because the first point, our initiative of our having one unique or only one crop forecast, it's something that shows people that we have very serious work. You see, coffee does not have the same organization as we do to have a crop forecast. You know, Fundecitrus is the seat of this. Fundecitrus is a heritage that we have. Let's help that to continue increasingly more. We work with Fundecitrus for like 20 years now, and we are always really pleased with what we see. It's an example of production chains in Brazil and the world. Just like to close my words by congratulating all of you. I think that the numbers I'd like to know about, I think I mentioned the figures. Citrus growers in Brazil will win. Juliano mentioned that this is not the first crisis in orange, not the last. We are going to overcome this crisis with science and technology and joint action. And last, I'd like to say how moved I am to be able to work with Dr. Monaco. I'd like to extend that to, you know, the whole family. We would have to have 300 Dr. Monacos. We would be in a very different level. So Dr. Monaco, congratulations. Please receive my best virtually. Very soon you're going to be together in person. Congratulations, Dr. Monaco. Thank you, Professor. I think that you ended up solving another question that came to us by internet. Mary Gomes, she asked about the position of the international market, the foreign market. I think you already answered that. We have a question here in the auditorium still.
Olá, bom dia.
Good morning. Congratulations. I'm Rodrigo Bandrão, journalist. We see here in this auditorium we have like we see in the slide there's a sea of orange trees. In terms of numbers, figures, Lauro, 36 million tons of carbon. I'd like you to elaborate on that figure, and I'd like you to talk about this pioneering work that seems to be very representative, something that in Brazil, at least in Southeast, we do wonderfully good, but sometimes it's not acknowledged abroad. So it seems to me to be very significant for orange, this figure. Yes, figures are very significant. 36 million tons of carbon. We consider the topsoil 0 to 30 centimeters of soil, topsoil layer. We have the exceedant native vegetation, preserved areas, plus the biomass of growth. And we convert it all into CO2 equivalent, that is the weight of the molecule and equivalent in molecules. 133 tons of CO2 equivalent that the citrus belt is holding, not releasing into the atmosphere. That is gross figure. That can be the baseline. Today we have only the gross data. It's a preliminary data. We have not gone into details. So we have general data. The idea is for us to convert that into the potential for carbon sequestering. Then we will understand how much the contribution of citriculture is for reducing release of carbon or carbon sequestering or both. And I see that in general, in average, this carbon stock is equivalent to a forest of a savanna. So if we consider Atlantic forest and Cerrado, we would have the equivalent of a major Cerrado, a Cerradão, covering all the area of citrus farms. It's as a comparison. We cannot compare that to other crops. Of course, we can. We have row crops. There, is much more significant. They have a standard for row crops of 5 tons of carbon in the biomass of row crops, and for perennial crops, we have OCC, we have 21,000 tons of carbon per hectare. In our math, it would go a bit beyond 100. So we are going to have exact figures. We still do not have the exact figure, but we have we have to work with the precision of that. We have to go to the field and measure and weigh trees to see the dry matter they have in different orchards, different ages of growth, like 3 to 5 and so on, to see how carbon is found in all citrus growing areas. So we have the initial knowledge. We took the first step, and then we are going to deal with the importance it's going to have in some carbon projects, as a professor mentioned here, people marketing carbon at $33 per ton of CO2 equivalent. That will provide us with the dimension of that we can bring in terms of money to growers. Even if it's not direct, also we have to have that in terms of acknowledgement to growers. Thank you, Lauro. Is there any other question from the auditorium? No? We are coming to the end of our meeting. For us to keep to the schedule, questions that have been asked through the chat and have not been answered will be answered later on. And right now, we'd like to have our thanks to our partners. I would like to thank our supporters. Embrapa, here represented by researcher Lauro Júnior. Thank you so much. Our heartfelt thanks to Innocent Drinks for funding the development of this project. Our thanks to citrus growers that every year open their farm gates to our past agents. This work is just possible thanks to the support of all of you. I'd like to thank also the citrus juice company Citrosuco, Cutrale, Louis Dreyfus for once again having allowed their growers to be part of sampling, and also for providing us with the information on the average weight of fruit received for industrial processing. I also like to thank the board of Fundecitrus, the board members, and the PES team members, and survey technical team for their permanent dedication. The summary of the crop forecast will be published after the end of this meeting, and the complete report will be published in due time. Thank you so much on behalf of Fundecitrus. 150 people in person here with us, and for joining us at this moment that is so important to Brazilian citriculture. I'd like to thank you that joined us online on YouTube. More than 20 countries joined us in this broadcasting, including the United States, Spain, Portugal, China. 300 people joining us in Portuguese, and 40 people listening to the English version of this. So I'd like to thank you all for being here, the whole Fundecitrus team for having me, and I wish you all a wonderful crop. See you next crop season.